Okay, so if you are considering going to Europe next year 2026 for studies, please ask yourself this one question. What's the visa approval rate of the country which I'm about to apply to, right? And what options do I have? Okay, please, if you ask yourself this question, I promise you, you won't fall into the wrong country, because right now there are some countries in Europe which have low visa approval rates. Please watch all this video to the end, and I will give you the list of 8 countries right now in Europe, countries which have high visa approval rates. Okay, and there's one thing you should know before I dive into the video. Please, before you give your money to any agent, right, ensure that you be the one to go do your visa alone. It is very impossible for an agent to go do your visa for you. I know so many students who have been scammed so far, saying that, oh, they give their money to agents and these agents get their money and now they're stranded left and right. Okay, please, if you want to go do your visa, there's no way that you can do your visa in any European country without the embassy taking your fingerprints or your biometrics. Okay, this is very impossible. The embassy or the consul general must take your biometrics before you can appear into their system, right? So it is very impossible for someone to go do your visa for you and it comes out. Okay, that is very impossible. Now let's go into the video without wasting much time. I have a list of 8 countries here. Now let's start with Luxembourg. Luxembourg is one of the countries in Europe that most students don't know about, especially most African students. It's one of the richest countries in Europe, right? And it also has a very high visa approval rate. Currently, I know of someone who traveled to Luxembourg 2 years ago, and this person is currently there, right? So Luxembourg is a country which has high visa approval rates. But there's one thing you should know about Luxembourg, right? Even though the country has a very high visa approval rates, but to actually get admission into the schools in Luxembourg is very difficult, like very difficult. Currently, there's only one cheap school, like one cheap university in Luxembourg, and it is very competitive. So before you think about applying for schools in Luxembourg, please, you need to be very, very fast and to follow all the instructions. Contrary to this, it's a country in Europe which accepts students massively into the universities. But the problem now is to get the visa into this country, and this country is Malta. So contrary to Luxembourg, where you can easily get a visa, but to get admission into the universities is very, very difficult. In Malta, you can easily get admissions into the schools in that country, but now the issue would be to get the visa appointments, right? Even if you get the visa appointment into Malta, you have to wait for so long. Now, the next country let's talk about is Lithuania. This country also has a very high visa approval rate. I've heard a lot of successful stories about students who have been approved in Lithuania. I've joined a Facebook group, and in this group there are so many students there who are talking about their successes into universities or into countries in Europe, right, using the student visas. And one of the countries which they are most talking about in this group is Lithuania. And students are saying that, oh, if you apply for schools in Lithuania, you will get the visas. Okay, and from my research, I've discovered that yes, that is true, because the visa approval rate to Lithuania is very high. I think it's like 65 to 90% at this moment, right? So before you go for schools in Europe, to consider Lithuania. It doesn't matter if you're in Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, any African countries, you can apply for schools in Lithuania and get your visa granted like within the time. Remember, the key to getting a visa approved is that you need to always apply in time. If you can apply as early as February, April, that'll be good. Okay, so please take all this into consideration. Now, the next country let's talk about is Norway. Norway also has a very high visa approval rate at this moment, and apart from that, there are also scholarships in Norway which you can also apply to. However, the tuition fees in Europe is not that cheap. It is very, very expensive. I've talked about this in my previous video. So before you go for Norway, please also consider the tuition fee, right? However, Norway has a very high visa approval rate. So if you apply for schools in Europe and follow all the procedure, pay your application fee, compile the necessary documents, do your own research, follow the instructions from A to Z, trust me, you will get your visa approved and be able to study into this country next year, 2026. Okay. The next country I want to talk about here is Italy. Now, I've made a video about this country days ago, very long video. Make sure you go and watch that video after you watch this video. However, Italy also has very high visa approval rates. Okay, I think one of the highest within Europe. And if you fill all the necessary information and put in your application as early as possible, you will be able to study in Europe. For students who have got rejected in other schools, please consider Italy. Okay, Italy is one of the countries in Europe which accept students right now, African students a lot. And there are so many schools there like University of Padua, University of Camerino, University of Macerata, a lot of schools there which accept students right now. In my next video, I will talk about the University of Padua and the information that you need to know before you can apply for the University of Padua. The deadline for this school ends on February 5th, 2026. Okay, please make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you will get notified when that video goes live, because it is very important that you know about these schools. Put in your application as early as possible. Follow the appropriate information from the Italian embassy and make sure you always check for updates because things change quickly. Now, the next country I want us to talk about here is Germany. Now, most people don't know that Germany has a very high visa approval rate right now. I have a friend who applied to this country like 2 years ago, and right now he's currently in Germany. But there's one thing you should know about Germany. Even though the country has a very high visa approval rate, but to actually secure an appointment for your visa is very, very difficult. So please take note that if you are considering applying for schools in Germany, the country has a very high visa approval rate. The issue now is the appointments, the visa appointments, right? It's very difficult to get, extremely difficult to get. So take all this into consideration. Most often you may have to wait for a very, very long time to get an appointment into the German embassy. Very, very long time. I know of someone now who have been waiting for like a year, or close to a year now, just to get an appointment into the German embassy, right? It's very, very difficult now, and you can wait, but if you ask me, I would tell you that this is a very dangerous move, especially for African students, because you can't wait for like 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, almost to a year to get an appointment. No, don't do that. If you discover that this is the case, right, please check other schools within the EU zone. There are so many other schools and so many other countries. Even the countries which I will mention in this video, or the countries which I've already mentioned in this video, you can check them. But if you do your own research and you discover that the appointment issue in Germany has changed, right? It's now moderate. You cannot apply for schools in Germany. So the next country here is Switzerland. Switzerland also has a very high approval rates, very high visa approval rates. This country is so private that most students don't even know about things in this country. There are so many schools in this country which accept students, right? It is very, very possible. And the country also has a very high approval rates. Why? Because most students don't actually apply for schools in Switzerland. That's why right now it has a very high approval rate. It is currently accepting international students. Okay, put in your application early, follow up the right documents, and trust me, you will be in Switzerland next year 2026. And the one good thing about this country is that it has a very high currency. For those who don't know, the currency in this country is so high. I think it is above the euros and the dollars. Okay, so if you can go to this country for studies, you actually finish your studies, then secure a job, trust me, you'll be okay, like super fine. So consider schools in Switzerland. So the next country I want to talk about here is Denmark. Denmark also has a very high visa approval rate for most people who don't know. However, things are changing in Denmark very drastically. Okay, so before you apply for schools in Denmark, please do your own research, okay, or watch other videos. I believe I've made a couple of videos about Denmark in my channel. Okay, go in there, search for those videos and watch them. And things are moving so slowly, as I earlier said, in Denmark, and things are changing. And one of the schools in Denmark which has changed its policies recently is the University of Copenhagen. This university has changed its policy recently because most students who went to Denmark recently or previously, most students who went into Denmark refused to study. As earlier said, they refused to study. They are more focused on their work than studies. So by so doing, the Danish immigration authorities have now placed a restriction, or has now limited the number of students who are coming into Denmark for studies, right? So please take all this into consideration. However, the country has a very high visa approval rate. So if you can secure an admission into this country, trust me, the chances of getting a visa into Denmark are very, very high. And there's one sweet thing about Denmark which you don't know yet. The thing is that you don't have to provide your proof of funds and you don't have to provide your block account if you have already paid your tuition fees. Okay, so for those who have already paid their tuition fees, please Note that you won't have to provide your block account and proof of funds. So basically, there's no proof of funds and block accounts in Denmark. Okay, take all this into consideration. Now, um, there are also countries like Austria. Austria also has a very high visa approval rate. Okay, very high visa approval rate. But the issue now with Austria is the legalization process. Austria has a lot of documents to legalize. Okay, just like in Spain. Spain has a lot of documents to legalize. Go up and down, translate. It's a lot. Okay. The last country I will talk about in this video is the Netherlands. Now, this country has a very high visa approval rate, at one of the highest in Europe, if not the highest in Europe. If you apply for schools in the Netherlands, your chances of getting a visa into this country is like 99% or 97% to 100%. That's for sure. You will get a visa into this country. However, the issue with the Netherlands is that it's very, very expensive, extremely expensive. I know of someone who managed to secure admissions into the Netherlands last year. They have been there, it's almost getting to a year now. And they told me the amount of money which is spent to secure admissions and to actually move into this country. It is very, very expensive. It is more than 20,000 euros. Okay, and I believe that most people who are going into schools in Europe, most of them are moving in there with a very limited budget. If you have the means to apply for schools in the Netherlands and if you manage to secure admissions into this country, it's good because your visa will be granted very easily. However, for those who are in Cameroon right now, please know that there is no embassy in Cameroon. If you want to actually go for your visa appointments, you have to travel to other countries like Ghana, Benin Republic. And I even checked recently, there are no appointments in the embassy in Benin Republic. The appointments there is so saturated. Like right now, there's no appointment there. So if you want to actually go for your visa appointments into this country, right, it means that you have to travel to Ghana and other countries. Okay, and someone told me that they have now opened a consul general in Lagos, Nigeria. I don't know if that is true. Please, those who are in Nigeria can talk about this.